Today I'm going to give you my thoughts on the Legendary Tier IJN heavy cruiser Zhao. And before we get into talking about the stats of the ship, a couple things to make a note of, besides the fact that our Shimakaze has 1,892 kills. What a Chad. Anyway, if you want to get the Zhao, you're going to have to navigate to the store and buy the Bureau Project, either for 5,000 doubloons, which I assume is a limited time offer, or 30,000 silver, which I believe will probably stay in the store indefinitely. After all, we still have the Bureau Projects for both the Legendary Tier CVs and the Schlieffen available in the store right now for 30 million silver. I suspect Zhao is going to stay around in a similar way. So the startup costs are pretty steep no matter what way you spin it. If you do buy the Bureau Project and complete it, what will you get? Well, we'll run down the stats now, but you can see that shot there against the GK doing like 8,000 damage and starting a fire. That gives you a little taste of what to expect from this cruiser. Now, keep in mind, I am using Azurlane Atago as my commander, so the stats I'm going to give you are influenced by her commander's skills. But I have tested this ship with Mikawa at the helm and also with Haguro, and it performs very well no matter who I've got running the thing. So, very consistent ship. We'll run down the stats now, and then I'll talk a little bit how it plays and whether I think it's worth pursuing. To begin with, it's got 45,910 hit points, which probably is not the best compared to some of the other Legendary Tier cruisers, but it gets the job done. Little low on the HP pool, though, honestly. The guns. There are 12 of them set in 4 triple turrets, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. They are the standard heavy cruiser size guns, 203 millimeters or 8-inch. On this build, I've got the reload down to 12.8 seconds because I am actually using the range mod, mostly because the turret traverse on this thing is abysmal, and the stock range is not all that great. Plus, these guns are not all that hard to aim at range, and, well, this thing is just so very good at farming, and that is because for the HE, with this Azurlane Atago build, the maximum damage per shell is 3,740, which is really, really good, and it's got a 27% fire chance. This thing is a flamethrower. The AP, 4,000 or 5,400 for the maximum damage. The AP is not where it's at on this thing. It can work, of course. You can Citadel cruisers and the like, but it doesn't seem like it has the best penetration. And really, the HE shells are the bread and butter here. The guns turn in 25 seconds with the turret traverse mod in the first slot rather than aiming systems mod 1. That was a trade-off that I wasn't sure I wanted to make. But the guns are accurate enough without aiming systems mod 1, and they probably benefit a little bit more from the turret traverse mod. This is not something a lot of people talk about, but I think T-Bull used to be fond of saying this. The turret traverse really does factor into your DPM, because if you're spending precious moments waiting for your turrets to turn and face a target so that you can actually shoot at them, well, you're not dealing any damage. And also, if you're trying to angle while still maintaining fire on a ship, it becomes very difficult to do that if your turrets are out-turning, or if your ship, rather, is out-turning your turrets. Of course, it doesn't at 25 seconds with the turret traverse mod. Then we've got torpedoes, which, to be fair, on the Zhao, I think are more or less potato bait. When I tell you that this thing has 20 Shimakaze torpedoes, you might immediately start salivating and think, oh my gosh, this is going to be a torpedo-focused cruiser. No, not at all. The torpedoes are set in 4 quintuple launchers. There are 2 on either side of the ship, so that's a total of 20 torpedoes in total, 20 Shima torpedoes, that is. They range out to 11 km, they've got a 67 knot speed, and they hit for 23,767 damage. They even have, I think, better torpedo detectability by sea than the Shima, 1.5, whereas the Shima has 1.7, I want to say. But other than that, these torpedoes are identical in their speed, their range, and their damage. And there are 20. The problem with these torpedoes is that in order to launch them, you have to be giving more or less flat broadside. The torpedo angles are terrible. They cannot fire forward. They cannot fire backward, even. They really just fire on the broadside. So I suspect a lot of people are going to see these, go, oh my gosh, they're Shima torpedoes. And once the Zhao reaches the general population, we'll probably see quite a few Zhaos turning broadside to launch these torpedoes and eating citadels and sinking because of it. That's why I say I think they're torpedo bait. Or potato bait, rather. Doesn't mean they aren't useful. They certainly can be. They hit hard, of course, and they've got good range. So if you can manage to launch them at somebody that's pushing in, sometimes you can score some hits. We actually might score some hits with them as this game continues. We're only about 6 minutes in right now, but we're pushing into the remainder of the enemy team, and here I think you might get a taste of how effective this HE can be. When you're shooting it at enemy destroyers, it can rip them apart, of course, provided you can hit them. Maybe sometimes it's difficult to get the lead. Are we going to get some damage on this Hayate before he vanishes? Maybe not. It's been a couple days since I played this particular match, so I don't remember all of the finer details. Here's the torpedoes, though, and I think this salvo is going to be fruitful. But you see just how terrible the angles are. Luckily, neither the GK or the Ruprecht are paying attention to us right now. But if they were, our broadside is exposed, and we could take an awful lot of damage. The AA defenses on this ship are nothing to speak too highly of, which I think is the same story for most IJN ships. Maneuverability on the Zhao is pretty good. It's got a top speed of 35.5 knots, an 840-meter turning circle, which isn't, fantastic, but it's not the worst either. Oh, there, by the way, we get a devastating strike on that Hayate with the torpedoes, and a double strike on the GK. So there you can see the torpedoes can, in fact, be useful. But rudder shift, by the way, on the Zhao, 7.7 seconds, which is excellent. That is base rudder shift time. I am not using the rudder shift mod or anything like that. The thing is quite agile base, and you might be tempted to use the rudder shift mod. I say don't use the propulsion mod and use the concealment mod. It's much more conducive and important to the Zhao's type of playstyle. With the concealment mod, by the way, and Mikawa as one inspiration on the commander, with Mikawa being rank 16, legendary 2, maybe 3. The detectability range by sea is 10.4 kilometers, which is nice and stealthy. So how does the Zhao play? Well, it's basically a continuation of the Miyoko, Mogami, Ibuki kind of idea. This is very much a kiting cruiser with heavy 8-inch guns that fire devastating HE. Basically, you want to stay at medium to long range. Ideally, you want ships to be pushing into you. If they are pushing in, then you farm them with the HE. You've got great damage from the guns themselves, you've got great accuracy on the shells, and you've got a great fire chance, regardless of what kind of commander you're using. And then, the armor scheme, which is something we haven't talked about on the Zhao. It's got 25mm bow and stern plating, so of course it can be overmatched by pretty much any battleship it is going to encounter at the Legendary Tier or Tier 8. But on the other hand, the side armor is 30mm plating, and it extends basically from the front turret to the rear turret. There's not a huge amount of bow and stern plating at 25mm. A good deal of the real estate on the flanks of the ship is 30mm plating, which means that that plating can be angled against enemy battleships that don't have Republic guns or larger. Republic at 430 or 431 millimeters can overmatch 30 millimeters of armor. So, of course, can the likes of Yamato and Musashi. So those ships you want to watch out for because they will penetrate your armor even if you're angled. But something like the Prinz Ruprecht or the Grosse Kurfürst earlier, we might have actually bounced some of their salvos. I don't think the GK shot at us, but the Ruprecht did. And I want to say we bounced some of his salvos off the 30mm plating. That makes the Zhao pretty tanky against anything with 16-inch guns. And if you don't have 18-inch guns, or I think the Republic has 17-inch guns, then 16-inch is the most common gun size you're going to see at Legendary Tier and Tier 8 right now. This 30mm plating will degrade or deplete in value, I'm sure, as time goes on, because there are a lot of high-tier battleships that we don't have in the game yet, and all of them have 457mm guns, which can overmatch this 30mm plating, and that'll make the Zhao less tanky if we start to see those battleships debut in World of Warships Legends, but for the moment, it is tanky enough to bounce a good deal of battleship salvos, which drastically increases the survivability. On the other hand, though, you might have noticed that the turret angles, both firing forward and firing backwards, are not the best. You do have to give a fair amount of broadside to get all 12 of these guns on target, whether you're pushing in or kiting away. So, if you're under sustained focus fire, it may be a little bit difficult to angle, but the excellent rudder shift can, of course, help you open the angle and close it again in between salvos so that you can keep yourself safe. But basically, this is the same sort of playstyle as the Mogami sort of Ibuki thing, where what you want to do is you want ships pushing into you, you want to kite away, you want to angle your armor at them, you want to be bobbing and weaving as they shoot back at you, and you just want to farm them with this HE. I've seen a lot of people say that this ship is like the most fantastic cruiser at Legendary Tier. When this thing debuted, only the CCs really got it. It's just been added into the game, so it's on loan to me for 2 weeks from Wargaming, and the same is true of my colleagues in the CC program. So right now, as far as the community can tell, we're really the only ones who are playing it, and a lot of us are fairly decent players, which probably makes it look a little bit better than it otherwise would if it were just floating around the general population. I don't say that to be arrogant or anything, and I'm not calling myself one of the best players in this game. I don't really think I am. I just think I happen to be fairly decent at analyzing it. In any case, I don't think the perception that I've heard from the general public so far is correct. This ship is not broken. It's not overpowered. I think it would be complete objective nonsense to call it that. It is a quite strong ship, much like the IJN cruiser line. That is a fairly strong line. It's an older line. It's not fantastic. It's not terrible. It's just solid. And I would say that is what the Zhao is. It's certainly not broken, but the HE power is formidable. That being said, again, the torpedo angles are poor. Even the main gun firing angles are poor. You can see just how much broadside we would have to show in order to get them on target. And it's best played at longer to medium ranges, which means that it's not always the best in terms of carrying the game. What it is the best at, or what it's very good at anyway, is just farming an awful lot of damage with its high explosive shells, which can be valuable, but that's not always going to win you the game. You're going to need to convert that damage into kills, or otherwise it's fairly useless, and you're going to need your teammates to cooperate. But when they do, this can be an excellent support cruiser used for farming a tremendous amount of damage. And I think it's pretty good. I think it is well worth buying the Bureau project. Personally, I'd do it for silver, and then starting it and getting the ship. It's a nice, normal, solid, heavy cruiser to have at Legendary Tier. Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.